Imagine sharing your apartment with someone who thinks your ability to create life is the most terrifying weapon in the galaxy. Someone who has traveled across star systems, witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, and commanded fleets of warships, yet finds herself genuinely afraid of the biological process that every human takes for granted. What happens when an advanced alien warrior discovers that humans don't just fight with weapons or technology, but with something far more dangerous, the unstoppable force of reproduction? This is the story of ZYXandra, a Vortex scout who thought she understood warfare, until she learned how humans multiply, and why the rest of the galaxy should be very, very concerned. Some discoveries change everything. Some secrets are too dangerous to keep. And, sometimes, your roommate accidentally becomes the most important person in an intergalactic conflict that nobody saw coming. Marcus Chen had always believed that the worst roommate situations involved dirty dishes, loud music, or someone who never paid rent on time. He had never imagined his biggest problem would be explaining to a 7-foot-tall alien warrior why humans kept baby photos on their refrigerators. ZYXandra stood in the middle of his small Chicago apartment, her silver-scaled skin catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Her forearms were crossed in what Marcus had learned was her thinking position, and her large, multifaceted eyes were focused on the collection of family photos magneted to his refrigerator door. She had been staring at them for 20 minutes now, occasionally tilting her elongated head in ways that would have broken a human neck. "These small humans," she said finally, her voice carrying the musical quality that made all Vortex speech sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, "they are offspring of the larger ones in these images?" Marcus looked up from his laptop where he had been trying to work on his graduate thesis about interspecies cultural exchange. The irony was not lost on him that he was living the subject of his research. "Yeah, those are baby pictures. You know, when humans are really young." ZYXandra's secondary arms twitched, a sign Marcus had learned indicated confusion or distress. "But they are so diminished. How do they survive? Where are their weapons? Their armor plating?" "They don't have any," Marcus said, closing his laptop and walking over to stand beside her. At 5'8", he barely reached her shoulder. "Human babies are born completely helpless. They can't even hold their heads up for the first few months." The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear the traffic on Lake Shore Drive 12 floors below. ZYXandra's primary arms slowly uncrossed, and she turned to look at him with an expression that, on her alien features, looked remarkably like horror. "You are making humor," she said, though her tone suggested she hoped he wasn't. "Nope. Completely serious. Human babies are basically useless for the first year or so. They can't walk, can't feed themselves, can't communicate beyond crying, and they definitely can't defend themselves." Marcus reached up to tap one of the photos, showing his nephew Tommy as a newborn. "This little guy? He couldn't even focus his eyes properly when this was taken." ZYXandra took 3 steps backward, bumping into the kitchen island. Her breathing had changed, becoming faster and shallower. On a human, Marcus would have diagnosed the beginnings of a panic attack. "But then," she said slowly, "how do they reach maturity? How does your species continue?" "Well, that's what parents are for. Adults take care of the babies until they can take care of themselves." Marcus was beginning to realize that this conversation was heading somewhere unexpected. In the 6 months since ZYXandra had become his roommate through the Intergalactic Cultural Exchange Program, he had learned that her species, the Vorthak, were born essentially as miniature adults, capable of independent survival within days of hatching. "For how long?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "Usually about 18 years, though some kids need help longer than that." ZYXandra made a sound that Marcus's universal translator couldn't parse, something between a growl and a whimper. She sank into one of his kitchen chairs, which creaked ominously under her weight but held. 18 years, she repeated. 18 rotations around your star. During which time, these offspring are completely dependent on adult protection. Right. I mean, they get more independent as they grow, but, yeah, basically. Marcus was starting to feel like he was missing something important. Why? How long do Vorthak babies need care? 3 days, ZYXandra said faintly. Sometimes 4 if they are weak. But, 18 years. She looked up at him, and Marcus was startled to see what looked like fear in her eyes. And you said this was normal? All human offspring require this level of care? Every single one. Well, except in really unusual circumstances. Marcus pulled out a chair and sat across from her. ZYX, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I do not know what a ghost is, but I suspect it would be less disturbing than this information. She leaned forward, placing her primary hands flat on the table. Marcus, in my culture, we consider it a great weakness to require care beyond the first few days of life. To need protection for years, it is unthinkable. But, you are saying that every human was once helpless for nearly 2 decades? Well, when you put it like that, it does sound pretty extreme. Marcus had never really thought about it from that perspective. But, that's just how we evolved. Human brains are really complex, so we need a lot of time to develop properly. The trade-off for being born helpless is that we can learn incredibly complicated things. ZYX Sandra's head tilted again. What sort of complicated things? Marcus gestured around the apartment. Well, I learned to speak 3 languages fluently. I can play piano, solve complex mathematical equations, write poetry, and I'm working on a PhD in xenocultural studies. My friend Sarah is a surgeon who can literally repair human hearts. My brother Mike can fly aircraft and land them on ships in the middle of storms. These skills, ZYX Andra said slowly, they are learned during the 18 years of dependency? Some of them, yeah. But, humans keep learning their whole lives. We're always picking up new skills, new knowledge, new ways of thinking. Marcus was warming to the topic now. That's actually why the exchange program works so well. Humans are really good at adapting to new situations because our brains are wired for constant learning. ZYX Andra was quiet for a long time, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the light and patterns Marcus had learned to interpret as deep thought. Finally, she spoke. On my world, we emerge from our shells knowing everything we need for survival. We can hunt, fight, navigate, and build basic tools within days. Our knowledge is fixed. We learn little beyond what is necessary for immediate survival. That sounds efficient, Marcus said carefully, sensing this was a sensitive topic. It is efficient, she agreed. But, it is also limiting. We do not change. We do not grow beyond our initial programming. A Vorthack warrior born today will have essentially the same capabilities as a Vorthack warrior born 1,000 years ago. Marcus was beginning to understand. But, humans can change. We can become more than what we were born to be. Yes, ZYX Andra said, and there was something like awe in her voice. You sacrifice immediate strength for the possibility of unlimited growth. It is. She paused, searching for words. It is the most courageous evolutionary strategy one have ever encountered. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone ringing. He glanced at the screen and saw his sister's name. Sorry, I should take this, he said, answering the call. Hey, Jenny. Marcus. Great news. I'm pregnant again. Marcus could hear the joy in his sister's voice, and he found himself grinning. That's amazing. Congratulations. How far along? About 8 weeks. We just got back from the doctor. Everything looks perfect. As Marcus chatted with his sister about due dates and baby names, he became aware that ZYX Andra had gone very, very still. Her breathing had stopped entirely, which was something Vorthack could do for extended periods when they were concentrating intensely. Okay, I'll call you later, Marcus said, ending the call. He looked over to find ZYX Andra staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. Your sister, she said carefully, she is creating offspring? Yeah, it's her second kid. She and David have been trying for months. Marcus was puzzled by her reaction. They're really excited. She is creating offspring deliberately, ZYX Andra repeated, as if testing the words. Well, yeah. Most humans do, when they're ready to be parents. Marcus was starting to get that feeling again, like he was walking into something he didn't understand. How do Vorthack decide when to have children? We do not decide, ZYX Andra said slowly. We spawn when environmental conditions trigger the biological imperative. It happens whether we wish it or not, usually every 7 to 10 years depending on resource availability. So you can't choose when to have kids? Choice is not part of the process. When conditions are suitable, females begin producing eggs. When eggs are present, males are compelled to fertilize them. The offspring hatch, survive or do not, and life continues. Marcus sat back in his chair, trying to process this. But humans can choose. We can decide if we want children, when we want them, how many we want. Yes, Zyxandra said, and her voice had taken on a strange quality. And these offspring, they require 18 years of intensive care. Right. And, during this time, the adults must provide food, shelter, protection, and education. Yep. And, despite this enormous investment of resources and time, humans continue to choose reproduction. Well, yeah. Most people want kids eventually. It's one of the most important things in human life. Zyxandra stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She began pacing the length of the small kitchen, her forearms moving in agitated patterns. Do you understand what you are telling me? She asked. I'm telling you how human reproduction works, Marcus said, genuinely confused now. I don't understand why this is so upsetting. Zyxandra stopped pacing and turned to face him. Marcus, in all my studies of warfare and conquest, I have learned that the most dangerous enemies are not those who are strongest or fastest or most numerous. The most dangerous enemies are those who are willing to sacrifice everything for their goals. Okay. Your species willingly takes on 18 years of vulnerability for each offspring. You invest massive resources in creatures that cannot contribute to their own survival. You do this by choice, repeatedly, knowing the costs. Her voice was rising now, taking on harmonics that made the windows vibrate slightly. Do you not see what this means? Marcus was starting to, and the realization was both flattering and slightly terrifying. It means we're committed? It means you are unstoppable, Zyxandra said. A species that can look at such tremendous costs and choose to pay them anyway, that can turn voluntary sacrifice into a reproductive strategy, that can invest decades in the future with no guarantee of return. Marcus, this is not just commitment. This is the kind of long-term thinking that conquers galaxies. She resumed pacing, her thoughts clearly racing. And, the offspring, after 18 years of intensive development, they possess capabilities far beyond their biological programming. They can adapt, learn, create, problem solve. You're making it sound like some kind of military strategy, Marcus said. Zyxandra stopped and looked at him with something that might have been respect, or might have been fear. Is it not? You create individuals capable of unlimited growth and adaptation, you are willing to invest decades in their development, and you do this by choice, as many times as you wish. The apartment fell silent again. Marcus found himself looking at the photos on his refrigerator with new eyes. His nephew Tommy, now 3 years old and learning to ride a bicycle. His cousin Sarah's twins, who were just starting to talk. His friend Mike's daughter, who was already reading chapter books at age 5. I never thought about it that way, he said finally. Because it is natural to you, Zyxandra replied. But, to the rest of the galaxy. Marcus, do you know how many species in the known universe reproduce by choice? I have no idea. 3. Including humans. And, the other 2 are extinct. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Extinct how? They destroyed themselves. The power to choose reproduction, to control the creation of the next generation, it proved too dangerous. They began competing over who could create the most capable offspring, improving them beyond natural limits, until they created beings they could no longer control. And, you think humans will do the same thing? Zyxandra was quiet for a long moment. I think, she said slowly, that humans are the first species I have encountered who might be wise enough not to. But, the potential is there, Marcus. The power your species wields through reproduction, it is beyond anything most civilizations can imagine. She walked back to the refrigerator and looked again at the photos. These small humans, she said softly, they will grow into beings capable of thought and creation beyond anything their genetics predetermined. That's the hope, anyway. It is not hope, Zyxandra said. It is certainty. And that, Marcus, is the most beautiful and terrifying thing I have ever learned about your species. As the sun set over Lake Michigan, Marcus found himself wondering what other aspects of human life he had taken for granted that might seem miraculous or terrifying to someone from another world. He looked at his alien roommate, who was still studying the baby photos with the intensity of a military strategist analyzing enemy fortifications, and realized that his thesis was going to need some major revisions. Outside, the city hummed with the activities of 8 million humans, most of whom had no idea they were part of what might be the galaxy's most successful reproductive strategy. Marcus made a mental note to call his sister back and congratulate her again, though he wasn't sure he would ever be able to look at pregnancy announcements quite the same way. In the growing darkness, Zyxandra finally turned away from the photos. I believe, she said quietly, I need to send a message to my superiors. They should know what I have learned about human reproduction. Should I be worried? Marcus asked. She considered this seriously. That depends entirely on how the Vortak High Command chooses to interpret this information. Your species may have just become either the galaxy's most valuable ally, or its most dangerous threat. Marcus looked around his small apartment, with its second-hand furniture and stack of library books, and tried to imagine it as ground zero for an intergalactic incident. Somehow, he suspected his thesis advisor hadn't prepared him for this particular research complication. 3 days after their conversation about human reproduction, Marcus noticed that Zyxandra had transformed his apartment into what looked like a military intelligence operation. Her sleeping area, which had previously contained only a meditation platform and her few personal belongings, now hosted multiple holographic displays showing what appeared to be demographic data, population charts, and star maps. ZYX, Marcus said, balancing a cup of coffee and his morning bagel as he tried to navigate around the floating displays, what exactly are you doing? She looked up from where she was crouched in front of a particularly complex hologram showing birth rates across various human populations. Her secondary arms were manipulating data streams while her primary hands held what Marcus had learned was a Vortak recording device. I am conducting research, she said, her tone suggesting this should be obvious. Your revelation about human reproduction has raised numerous questions that require investigation. Marcus set his breakfast down on the kitchen counter and walked closer to examine the displays. The detail was staggering. He could see population growth curves for every continent, birth rate statistics going back decades, and what looked like projections extending far into the future. Where did you get all this data? He asked. Your internet, Zyxandra replied absently, adjusting something that made one of the displays zoom in on what looked like fertility rates in different countries. It is remarkably comprehensive. I had not realized that humans document their reproductive patterns so thoroughly. Wait, you hacked into government databases? I did not hack anything, she said, sounding mildly offended. All of this information is publicly available. Your species shares data about birth rates, death rates, population growth, and reproductive trends openly. It is unusual. Marcus looked at the displays again, seeing them now with fresh eyes. Most species don't share that kind of information? Most species barely track it, Zyxandra stood, her full height making the displays seem to orbit around her like a technological solar system. For the Vortak, reproduction simply happens. We do not measure it, analyze it, or plan around it. But humans. She gestured to the data surrounding them. You study your own reproduction like a science. Well, it kind of is a science. Demographics, population planning, public health policy, understanding reproduction is important for managing society. Zyxandra's multifaceted eyes fixed on him with laser focus. Exactly. You manage it. You study patterns, identify trends, and make decisions based on reproductive data. Do you understand how extraordinary this is? Before Marcus could answer, one of the displays began flashing in what he assumed was an alien equivalent of an alert. Zyxandra moved to it quickly, her forearms working in concert to manipulate the data stream. What is it? Marcus asked. I have been monitoring human birth announcements across your social networks, she said, her voice tense with concentration. The patterns are remarkable. Marcus looked at the display she was manipulating. It showed what appeared to be a real-time feed of pregnancy announcements, birth announcements, and related social media posts from around the world. The sheer volume was overwhelming. How many humans are born every day? Zyxandra asked. I don't know the exact number. Maybe around 350,000? Zyxandra made that untranslatable sound again. 350,000 helpless offspring, requiring 18 years of intensive care each, born every rotation of your planet. When you put it like that, it does sound pretty intense, Marcus admitted. Intense? Zyxandra turned from the display to stare at him. Marcus, in 18 years, that is over 2 billion new humans who will require education, resources, protection, and guidance. And all of them will possess the capacity for unlimited learning and adaptation. She manipulated another display, showing him population projections. At current rates, by the time today's newborns reach maturity, your planet will host over 10 billion humans, each one capable of innovation, creativity, and problem-solving beyond their genetic programming. Marcus was beginning to understand why this was keeping her up at night. And, you think that's dangerous? I think it is the most successful conquest strategy ever developed, she said grimly. And, the most terrifying aspect is that you are not trying to conquer anything. This is simply how your species reproduces. A soft chiming sound drew their attention to another display, this one showing what appeared to be incoming communication requests. Zyxandra's posture immediately became more formal. My superiors wish to speak with me, she said. They have received my preliminary report about human reproductive capabilities. Should I leave? Marcus asked. No, Zyxandra said quickly, then paused. Actually, they may wish to question you directly. Would you be willing to speak with the Vordak High Command? Marcus felt his heart rate spike. The High Command? As in, the people who run your entire civilization? Yes. Your species has attracted significant attention since my initial report. She hesitated. Marcus, I must warn you, they may not respond to human reproduction the way I have. What do you mean? I am a scout. I am trained to observe and analyze. But, the High Command consists of warriors and strategists. They think in terms of threats and opportunities. Her voice carried a note of concern that Marcus had never heard before. They may view human reproductive capability as something that needs to be managed. The implications of that hit Marcus like cold water. Managed how? Before Zyxandra could answer, the largest holographic display activated, showing the intimidating forms of 3 Vordak who made Zyxandra look small by comparison. Their scales were darker, their builds more heavily muscled, and they carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of military command. Scout Zyxandra, the center figure, spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that made Marcus's teeth ache. We have reviewed your report. The claims you make about human reproduction seem improbable. Zyxandra straightened into a formal posture Marcus had never seen her adopt. High Commander Velvar, my observations have been verified through extensive data analysis. I can demonstrate the accuracy of my findings. Do so, the figure on the right commanded. Unlike the others, this one's voice was higher-pitched, almost musical. Marcus's universal translator identified the speaker as female. Show us this human reproductive strategy you claim is so formidable. For the next hour, Marcus found himself serving as a live example while Zyxandra presented her research to the High Command. She showed them the population data, the birth rate statistics, and the educational systems that supported human development. She explained the concept of schools, universities, and lifelong learning. She demonstrated how humans could acquire skills far beyond their genetic programming. The High Command listened in increasingly tense silence. This human, the left-hand figure finally, said, pointing one of its 4 arms at Marcus. How long did its education require? Marcus cleared his throat nervously. Well, I went to school for 12 years, then university for 4 years, then graduate school for another 6 years. And I'm still learning. 22 years of education beyond hatching, the commander said slowly. and you are still acquiring new capabilities. That's pretty normal, Marcus said. Most of my friends have similar educational backgrounds. Some have more. The High Command exchanged looks that Marcus couldn't interpret but, which clearly disturbed Zyxandra. Scout, High Commander Velder said, you mentioned that humans reproduce by choice. Explain. Zyxandra activated another display, this one showing social media posts about family planning, pregnancy announcements, and parenting discussions. Humans can decide when to reproduce, how many offspring to create, and how much investment to make in each individual. They discuss these decisions openly, plan for them years in advance, and coordinate with their chosen mates. They coordinate reproductive strategy, the female commander said, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. They plan the creation of enhanced individuals. Enhanced how? Velvar demanded. Marcus felt compelled to speak up. We're not enhanced. We're just educated. Every human has the potential to learn and grow beyond their starting point. That's normal for us. Normal, the third commander repeated. A species where every individual can exceed their genetic limitations, and this is considered normal. The female commander leaned forward in the display. Human, demonstrate this learning capability. Acquire a new skill while we observe. Marcus looked at Zyxandra, who gave him an encouraging nod. He thought for a moment, then pulled out his phone and opened a language learning app. Okay, I'm going to try to learn some basic Mandarin, he said, starting the first lesson. Over the next 20 minutes, while the Vortak High Command watched in fascination and growing alarm, Marcus worked through pronunciation guides, memorized basic vocabulary, and began constructing simple sentences. "Ni-hao," he said finally, looking up at the display. That means hello in Chinese. 20 minutes ago, I couldn't speak a word of it. The silence that followed was absolute. It acquired functional communication in an unknown language in less than one standard time period, the female commander said finally. And, this is normal human capability, Veldar added. Yes, Zyxandra confirmed. Humans learn constantly throughout their lives. They can acquire new languages, skills, knowledge domains, and creative abilities at will. Scout Zyxandra, the third commander said, in your assessment, what is the upper limit of human adaptability? I do not believe there is one, she replied. Every human I have observed has capabilities that exceed their apparent biological limitations. And, they continue developing new capabilities throughout their lifespans. The High Command conferred among themselves in rapid, harmonically complex speech that Marcus's translator couldn't follow. Finally, Veldar addressed them again. Scout, you will continue your observations. We need complete information about human reproductive and educational systems. Pay particular attention to how they coordinate large-scale learning initiatives and resource allocation for offspring development. Yes, High Commander. And, human, Veldar's attention turned to Marcus, you will assist in this investigation. We need to understand your species' capabilities fully. After the communication ended, Marcus sat heavily in one of his kitchen chairs. That didn't seem to go well. Zyxandra was deactivating the displays one by one, her movements unusually agitated. No, it did not. They view human reproduction as a potential military threat. But, we're not trying to threaten anyone. We're just having kids and sending them to school. That is precisely what terrifies them, Zyxandra said. You are creating billions of individuals capable of unlimited growth and adaptation, and you are doing it without apparent military purpose. To a warrior culture like the Vortak, an enemy without clear objectives is the most dangerous enemy of all. Marcus felt a chill of real fear. What do you think they'll do? Zyxandra was quiet for a long time, staring at the space where the holographic displays had been. I believe they will want to understand human reproduction more completely before making any decisions. But, Marcus, you must understand, the Vortak have never encountered a species like yours. We do not know how to categorize you. What do you mean? In our experience, there are 3 types of species: allies, enemies, and food. Humans do not fit any of these categories. She turned to look at him, and her expression was grave. You may have just created a fourth category, and I do not know what the consequences of that will be. That evening, as Marcus tried to work on his thesis, he found himself unable to concentrate. Every time he looked at the empty space where ZYXandra's displays had been, he thought about the High Command's reaction to human reproduction. The idea that having children and sending them to school could be viewed as a military threat was so alien to him that he struggled to process it. Around midnight, ZYXandra approached him as he sat staring blankly at his laptop screen. "I have been thinking," she said quietly. "About what?" "About why human reproduction is so effective, and why it frightens my people." She sat down across from him, her forearms folded in contemplation. "I believe it is because humans have solved a problem that no other species has managed." "What problem?" "The balance between security and growth," she said. "Most species, including the Vorthak, prioritize immediate survival. We create offspring that can defend themselves quickly, but they cannot grow beyond their initial capabilities. Humans do the opposite. You sacrifice immediate security for the possibility of unlimited growth." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's kind of what you said before." "Yes, but I have realized something else. This is not just a reproductive strategy. It is a civilizational philosophy." Her eyes gleamed in the lamplight. "Humans do not just apply this principle to raising children. You apply it to everything." "What do you mean?" "Your universities, your research institutions, your cultural exchanges like the program that brought me here," ZYXandra explained. "All of these represent the same principle, accepting short-term costs and vulnerability in exchange for long-term growth and capability." Marcus hadn't thought about it that way, but she was right. Universities were expensive and didn't produce immediate practical benefits. Research often took decades to pay off. Cultural exchange programs like the one ZYXandra was part of were costly and sometimes created diplomatic complications. "And that's frightening to the Vorthak?" "It is incomprehensible to us," she said. "We cannot imagine choosing vulnerability for the sake of potential growth. But humans do it instinctively, at every level of your civilization." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Marcus, I do not think the High Command understands what they are truly observing. They see human reproduction as a military strategy, but it is much more than that. It is the foundation of a completely different approach to existence itself." As Marcus finally closed his laptop and prepared for bed, he found himself wondering about all the human children being born around the world that night. 350,000 new lives, each one representing an 18-year investment in an uncertain future. For the first time, he saw it through alien eyes, and the audacity of it took his breath away. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Vorthak High Command was analyzing human civilization and trying to determine whether humanity represented an opportunity or a threat. Marcus suspected they were asking the wrong question entirely, but he had no idea how to explain what the right question should be. Outside his window, Chicago slept, unaware that one of its residents had just become ground zero for the galaxy's first encounter with a species that turned vulnerability into strength, and uncertainty into hope. Marcus woke up to find ZYXandra standing motionless in the center of his living room, all four of her arms extended and perfectly still, her head tilted back at an impossible angle. She had been in this position when he went to bed 6 hours earlier. "ZYX," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond. Marcus had learned that Vorthak entered deep meditative states when processing complex information, but he had never seen her maintain the position for this long. Concerned, he approached slowly. "ZYXandra?" This time, her multifaceted eyes shifted to focus on him without her head moving. When she spoke, her voice had an odd, distant quality. "Marcus, how many humans are there on your planet?" "About 8 billion, give or take." "And how many of those are currently under the age of 18? Marcus had to think about it. "Maybe around 2 billion? "I'm not sure of the exact number." ZYXandra's arms slowly lowered, and she turned to face him fully. 2 billion developing humans. All of them in various stages of acquiring capabilities beyond their genetic programming. That's one way to put it, I guess. Why? Instead of answering, she walked to where her holographic displays had been and activated a new configuration. This time, the images were different. Instead of population charts and birth rate statistics, Marcus found himself looking at what appeared to be historical data about other species. "I have spent the night researching the galactic archives," Zyxandra said. "I wanted to understand how human reproductive patterns compare to other known civilizations." The display showed a timeline stretching back thousands of years, with markers indicating the rise and fall of various interstellar civilizations. Marcus could see species names he didn't recognize, alongside data about their population growth, technological development, and eventual fate. "This is the Cathari Empire," Zyxandra said, highlighting a section of the timeline. At their peak, they controlled 47 star systems and had a population of 12 billion individuals. That's more than Earth's current population. Yes. But, observe their reproductive pattern. The display zoomed in to show detailed demographic data. Cathari offspring reached full maturity in 2 years and required no parental investment beyond basic nutrition. They could reproduce every year after reaching maturity. Marcus studied the charts. So they could expand much faster than humans. Initially, yes. Their population could double every 3 years under optimal conditions. They achieved faster-than-light travel in less than 2 centuries after developing agriculture. Zyxandra manipulated the display to show technological milestones. But, then, observe what happened. The timeline showed the Cathari civilization plateauing after about 500 years, their technological advancement slowing, their expansion halting, and, finally, their empire fragmenting and disappearing from the historical record. What happened to them? They reached the limit of their adaptive capacity, Zyxandra explained. Because their offspring required no extended development period, each individual possessed essentially the same capabilities as their parents. They could grow in numbers, but they could not grow in capability. When they encountered challenges that required genuine innovation rather than just more of the same approach, they failed. She switched to another civilization. The Morvan Republic. Offspring matured in 6 months, minimal parental investment, could reproduce continuously. They achieved interstellar travel even faster than the Cathari. And they also disappeared? Catastrophic overpopulation followed by resource wars and civilizational collapse. Their rapid reproduction allowed them to fill available space faster than they could develop sustainable technologies. Zyxandra showed him civilization after civilization, all following similar patterns. Fast maturation, rapid population growth, quick technological development, then stagnation and decline. Do you see the pattern, Marcus? They all expanded quickly but couldn't adapt to new challenges? Precisely. And, now observe this. She activated a new display showing human civilization. Your species achieved agriculture approximately 10,000 years ago. You developed writing, mathematics, metallurgy, and complex social structures. But your population growth was extremely slow by galactic standards. Marcus could see that human population had remained relatively small for most of history, only beginning to grow rapidly in recent centuries. Then, something changed, Zyxandra continued. Around 250 years ago, human population growth accelerated dramatically. At the same time, your technological advancement increased exponentially. You went from simple agriculture to spaceflight in less time than most species require to develop basic metallurgy. The Industrial Revolution, Marcus said, understanding. We figured out how to support larger populations and educate them more effectively. Yes, but that is not the remarkable part. Zyxandra zoomed in on the most recent portion of the timeline. The remarkable part is that as your population grew, your rate of innovation also grew. Most species experience the opposite. Larger populations lead to stagnation as resources become devoted to basic survival rather than advancement. Marcus looked at the display more carefully. She was right. The graphs showed human technological advancement accelerating alongside population growth, rather than slowing down. But humans show the opposite pattern because of your extended development period, Zyxandra continued. Each new generation can build on the knowledge of previous generations. Your 18 years of intensive development allows for the transfer and expansion of accumulated knowledge. We call it standing on the shoulders of giants, Marcus said. An apt metaphor. But, Marcus, do you understand what this means for your species' future trajectory? Before he could answer, the communication system activated again. This time, instead of the 3 high commanders, the display showed what appeared to be a massive conference room filled with Vorthac officials. Marcus counted at least 20 figures arranged in concentric circles. Scout Zyxandra, High Commander Velvar's voice carried additional harmonics that suggested extreme urgency. We have analyzed your data. Convene a full strategic assessment. We must understand the implications of human reproductive capacity immediately. Yes, High Commander. I have prepared additional research that I believe you will find significant. Present your findings. For the next 2 hours, Marcus found himself witnessing what could only be described as an alien version of a War Council meeting. Zyxandra presented her historical analysis, showing how human civilization compared to other known species. She demonstrated the relationship between extended childhood development and innovation capacity. She explained how human education systems had evolved to support increasingly complex knowledge transfer. The Vorthac officials listened with growing agitation. Let me understand this correctly, one of them finally said. Humans create offspring that require 18 years of resource investment. During this period, the offspring acquire capabilities far beyond their genetic programming. Then, these enhanced individuals create their own offspring, transferring their acquired capabilities plus additional innovations. That is correct, Zyxandra confirmed. And, this process has been accelerating over time. Yes. Human innovation capacity appears to scale with population size rather than being limited by it. Another official leaned forward. What is the theoretical upper limit of this process? I do not believe there is one, Zyxandra said. As long as humans maintain their education systems and continue choosing to reproduce, each generation should be capable of exceeding the achievements of the previous generation. The silence that followed was profound. Scout, High Commander Velvar said slowly, are you saying that human civilization is designed for unlimited growth? I am saying that human civilization is the first we have encountered that does not contain its own growth limitations. Marcus felt compelled to speak up. I don't think we designed it that way. It's just how things worked out. Every alien eye in the conference focused on him with laser intensity. Explain, Velvar commanded. Well, we didn't set out to create a civilization capable of unlimited growth. We just wanted our kids to have better lives than we did. So we invested in their education, tried to give them more opportunities, hoped they'd solve problems we couldn't solve. You created each generation to exceed the capabilities of the previous generation, another official said. I guess, yeah. That's kind of the point of being a parent. The conference erupted in rapid, harmonically complex discussion that Marcus's translator couldn't follow. Finally, Velvar restored order. Human, this desire for offspring to exceed parental capabilities, this is universal among your species? Pretty much. I mean, there are exceptions, but most parents want their kids to have better lives than they did. Better lives how? Marcus thought about it. More education, better jobs, more opportunities to travel and learn and create things. Most parents sacrifice so their children can achieve more than they did. And the offspring, when they become adults, do they follow the same pattern? Sure. My parents worked hard so I could go to college. Now I'm working on a PhD. If I have kids someday, I'll probably try to give them even more opportunities than my parents gave me. The alien conference fell silent again. Finally, the female commander who had spoken in the previous meeting addressed Zyxandra. Scout, in your assessment, what would happen if human population growth continued at current rates while maintaining current educational investment levels? Zyxandra manipulated her displays to show projection models. Based on current trends, human population should stabilize at approximately 10 to 12 billion individuals within the next century. However, the educational capacity and innovation output should continue growing exponentially. Meaning? meaning that within 500 years, humans should possess technological capabilities equivalent to civilizations that have existed for 10,000 years. Within 1,000 years, they may exceed anything in our historical records. And this assumes no external intervention or guidance, another official added. Correct. These projections assume humans continue developing independently. High Commander Velder stood, his massive form dominating the display. Scout ZYXandra, Marcus Chen of Earth, by the authority of the Vortak High Command, I am declaring human civilization to be a Class Omega development. This matter now falls under the jurisdiction of the Galactic Oversight Council. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice water. What does that mean? It means, ZYXandra said quietly, that your species has been classified as a potential galactic game-changer. The Oversight Council will now determine whether human civilization represents an acceptable risk to galactic stability. The display showed the various officials rising and beginning to file out of the conference room. Before the communication ended, Veldar addressed them one final time. Scout, you will continue monitoring and reporting. Under no circumstances are you to interfere with human reproductive or educational processes until the Council reaches a decision. Human Marcus, you are now considered a resource of galactic significance. You will cooperate fully with ongoing observation. After the communication ended, Marcus sat in stunned silence. Finally, he looked at ZYXandra. So, let me get this straight. Because humans invest a lot in raising kids, and because we've gotten pretty good at education, the galactic government is now concerned that we might accidentally become too advanced? That is, a simplified but accurate assessment. And what exactly does galactic significance mean for me personally? ZYXandra's expression was impossible to read. It means, Marcus, that your thesis about interspecies cultural exchange has become considerably more important than either of us anticipated. Marcus looked around his small apartment, with its everyday furniture and collection of family photos, and tried to process the fact that he was apparently now part of an intergalactic incident that had started with a conversation about baby pictures. I don't suppose there's any chance this is all some kind of misunderstanding, he asked. I wish there were, ZYXandra replied. But the mathematics are quite clear. Human reproductive strategy, combined with your educational systems, has created something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization with unlimited growth potential. She paused, looking at the family photos that had started this entire chain of events. The question now is whether the galaxy is ready for that, or whether it will decide that humanity needs to be managed before you become too powerful to manage at all. Marcus spent the rest of the day trying to work on his thesis, but found himself unable to concentrate on interspecies cultural exchange theories when he was apparently living through what might be the most significant interspecies cultural exchange in galactic history. As night fell over Chicago, he stood at his window looking out at the city lights, each one representing thousands of humans going about their daily lives, completely unaware that their species' approach to raising children had just attracted the attention of an intergalactic oversight committee. Somewhere out there, millions of human parents were reading bedtime stories to their children, helping with homework, and planning for their kids' futures. None of them knew that this universal human behavior had been classified as potentially dangerous to galactic stability. Marcus thought about calling his sister to congratulate her again on her pregnancy, then realized he had no idea whether that conversation might now be monitored by alien intelligence agencies. He was pretty sure his thesis advisor definitely hadn't prepared him for this. 2 weeks after being declared a resource of galactic significance, Marcus had grown accustomed to his apartment being under constant surveillance by alien technology he couldn't see. What he hadn't expected was for the Galactic Oversight Council to request a field demonstration of human education in action. They want to observe what? Marcus asked, staring at ZYXandra in disbelief. A human educational facility in operation, she repeated, manipulating holographic displays that showed schematics of various schools and universities in the Chicago area. The council needs to witness firsthand how humans transfer knowledge to their developing offspring. You want to take a bunch of alien officials on a field trip to an elementary school? The council representatives will observe remotely through my equipment. You will serve as guide and interpreter. ZYXandra's expression had taken on the formal bearing she adopted whenever discussing council directives. We have been granted permission to observe at one facility of your choosing. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. Okay, let's think about this logically. We need a place where the kids won't be too freaked out by alien observation equipment, where the teachers might be open to having visitors, and where we can see a good cross-section of human education. I have researched several possibilities, Zyxandra said, activating a new display. This facility appears optimal for our requirements. The hologram showed Lincoln Elementary School, about 15 minutes from his apartment. Marcus recognized it as the school where his friend Sarah worked as a third-grade teacher. I might be able to arrange something there, Marcus said slowly. Sarah's always complaining that people don't understand how much work goes into teaching kids. She might actually appreciate having some observers who want to understand the process. 3 days later, Marcus found himself standing in Sarah Hendricks' classroom at 7 in the morning, watching Zyxandra set up observation equipment while trying to explain the situation without mentioning the part about galactic oversight councils. So you're doing research on how different species approach education? Sarah asked, arranging materials for the day's lessons while eyeing Zyxandra with fascination. Something like that, Marcus said. Zyxandra's people are very interested in human learning processes. Sarah was a veteran teacher in her 40s who had seen everything the education system could throw at her. She had taken the request for classroom observation in stride, especially when Marcus had mentioned that it might contribute to his thesis research. Well, you picked an interesting day, she said. We're starting a new unit on local ecosystems, the kids have their multiplication tables quiz, and Tommy Chen is bringing his new baby sister for show and tell. Marcus felt his blood pressure spike. Tommy Chen is bringing a baby? His parents thought it would be nice for the class to meet her since Tommy's been talking about her non-stop for weeks. Sarah looked puzzled by his reaction. Is that a problem? Before Marcus could explain why a human infant might not be the ideal subject for alien observation, the first students began arriving. Marcus watched Zyxandra's equipment register their presence as 23 7-year-olds filed into the classroom with the chaotic energy that seemed to define that age group. Good morning, class. Sarah called out. Good morning, Miss Hendricks, the children chorused back. Marcus glanced at Zyxandra, who was monitoring multiple data streams from her equipment. Her multifaceted eyes were tracking the children's movements with the intensity of a military analyst studying enemy formations. Today we have some special visitors, Sarah announced. This is Mr. Marcus, who's a student at the university, and Ms. Zyxandra, who's visiting from very far away to learn about how we do school here. A dozen small hands shot up immediately. Are you an alien? Asked a girl with bright red pigtails. Zyxandra looked at Marcus for guidance. He nodded slightly. I am from a planet called Vorth Prime, she said carefully. I am here to learn about human education. Cool, shouted several children simultaneously. Do you have schools on your planet? Asked a boy wearing a dinosaur t-shirt. We do not have schools as humans understand them, Zyxandra replied. Young Vorthak learn everything they need for survival within a few days of hatching. That's super fast, the red-haired girl exclaimed. It takes us forever to learn stuff. Marcus saw Zyxandra's posture shift slightly, and he realized this casual comment had just illustrated exactly the point that had the Galactic Oversight Council concerned. All right, class, Sarah said, redirecting their attention. Let's start with our morning math warm-up. Who can tell me what 7 times 8 equals? Hands flew up around the room. Sarah called on a boy in the front row. 56. Very good, David. How did you figure that out? I remembered that 7 times 7 is 49, and then I added 7 more. Marcus noticed Zyxandra leaning forward as she recorded this exchange. The idea that a 7-year-old human could perform mathematical calculations using strategic thinking rather than pure memorization was apparently noteworthy. The math session continued for 20 minutes, with the children working through increasingly complex multiplication problems. Marcus watched Zyxandra track how the students approached different types of problems, how they helped each other when someone was stuck, and how Sarah adapted her teaching methods to different learning styles within the same classroom. Now, Sarah said, let's transition to our science lesson. We're going to start learning about ecosystems. Can anyone tell me what an ecosystem is? A girl near the back raised her hand. It's like all the plants and animals that live together in one place? That's a great start, Emma. What else might be part of an ecosystem? The weather, called out another student. The soil, added a third. Excellent observations. Now, I want everyone to work in groups of 3 to create a diagram of an ecosystem they know. It could be a forest, a pond, a desert, whatever you choose. Include all the different parts that make the ecosystem work. Marcus watched as the children self-organized into groups, began discussing their choices, and started sketching diagrams with remarkable sophistication for their age. One group was debating whether bacteria should be included in their pond ecosystem. Another was arguing about the role of decomposers in forest soil. These offspring, Zyxandra murmured to Marcus, they are generating new knowledge through collaborative discussion. That's kind of the point, Marcus replied quietly. They're not just memorizing facts. They're learning how to think about complex systems. The observation continued through reading time, where the children demonstrated reading comprehension skills that impressed even Marcus. They discussed character motivation, made predictions about story outcomes, and connected events in the book to their own experiences. Then came the moment Marcus had been dreading. Okay, class, Sarah announced. It's time for our special show and tell presentation. Tommy, would you like to introduce your baby sister? Tommy Chen, a serious-faced boy with wire-rimmed glasses, walked to the front of the classroom carrying what Marcus now realized was a 3-week-old human infant. Behind him walked a woman Marcus assumed was his mother. This is my baby sister Lucy, Tommy announced proudly. She was born 22 days ago. Marcus felt the ambient temperature in the room drop as Zyxandra's equipment focused intensively on the infant. Every sensor array she had deployed was now recording data about the most helpless human in the room. She's really small, observed one of the students. She can't even hold her head up yet, Tommy explained with the authority of an experienced big brother. Mom has to support it when she holds her. What can she do? Asked Emma. Tommy considered this seriously. Well, she can cry really loud. And she can drink milk. And she sleeps a lot. She can't walk or talk or anything useful yet. When will she be able to do stuff? David wanted to know. Mom says it'll be months before she can even sit up by herself, Tommy replied. And years before she can go to school like us. Mrs. Chen stepped forward with a gentle smile. Would anyone like to ask questions about babies? The questions came in a flood. How big was she when she was born? Did it hurt when she came out? Why can't babies walk right away? How long until she can play games? Marcus watched Zyxandra's equipment tracking every aspect of this interaction. The children's curiosity about infant development, their understanding that humans required years of care, their casual acceptance of this enormous investment of time and resources. The interesting thing about human babies, Mrs. Chen was explaining, is that they need so much care because their brains are still growing. By the time Lucy is your age, her brain will have learned millions of new things. Like what? Asked a fascinated student. Well, she'll learn to talk, to read, to write, to do math, to ride a bike, to make friends, to solve problems. Mrs. Chen looked around the classroom. Think about everything you know now that you didn't know when you were babies. Lucy has all of that learning ahead of her. Marcus glanced at Zyxandra and saw that her posture had become very still. He recognized this as her deep concentration pose. After Mrs. Chen and baby Lucy left, the class returned to their regular activities. But Marcus could see that the demonstration had profoundly affected the alien observer. During lunch break, while the children were in the cafeteria, Zyxandra activated her communication array. Hi Command, she said formally, I am transmitting observational data from Human Educational Facility Designation Lincoln Elementary. The familiar figures of the High Command appeared in the holographic display, along with what Marcus now recognized as several members of the Galactic Oversight Council. Report, Scout, High Commander Veldar commanded. I have observed 23 developing humans between the ages of 6 and 8 Earth years. They demonstrated mathematical reasoning, collaborative problem-solving, creative thinking, and complex language comprehension. All of these capabilities were acquired through systematic instruction over multiple years. Continue. Most significantly, I observed the interaction between developed humans and a newly emerged infant. The offspring was completely helpless, as previously documented. However, the adult humans and even the juvenile humans demonstrated detailed knowledge about infant development and the learning process. One of the council members leaned forward. Explain. The humans understand their own development process. They know that each individual will acquire capabilities over time, and they plan their educational investments accordingly. This is not instinctive behavior, it is conscious, strategic planning for capability development. And your assessment of this educational facility? Zyxandra paused before answering. High Command, this single facility is developing the cognitive capabilities of 23 individuals simultaneously. The instructor demonstrated the ability to adapt teaching methods to individual learning patterns while maintaining group coordination. The offspring showed evidence of rapid knowledge acquisition and practical application. How does this compare to Vorthack development protocols? There is no comparison, Zyxandra said flatly. Vorthack development is complete within days and requires no external instruction. Human development is intensive, prolonged, and produces capabilities that far exceed genetic programming. High Commander Veldar exchanged glances with the council members. Scout, in your assessment, how many such facilities exist on Earth? Marcus felt compelled to speak up. Every community has multiple schools. There are elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and universities. Millions of facilities worldwide. Millions, repeated one of the council members slowly. And they operate simultaneously across the planet, Zyxandra confirmed. At any given moment, approximately 2 billion young humans are engaged in active capability development. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long. Scout Zyxandra, High Commander Veldar said finally, the Council requires additional data before reaching a decision about human civilization. You will expand your observations to include multiple educational levels and multiple geographical locations. Yes, High Commander. And, Scout, another voice added, Marcus recognized the female commander from earlier meetings, pay particular attention to how humans coordinate knowledge transfer across these millions of facilities. We need to understand the full scope of their educational infrastructure. After the communication ended, Marcus and Zyxandra sat in silence in the empty classroom, surrounded by colorful educational posters and children's artwork. They're scared, aren't they? Marcus said finally. Terrified, Zyxandra confirmed. What we observed today was a single classroom in a single facility in a single city. Yet the level of capability development was extraordinary by galactic standards. And, when they realized that this is happening simultaneously in millions of classrooms around the world. Yes, Zyxandra said grimly. They are beginning to understand that human civilization is not just capable of unlimited growth, it is actively designed for unlimited growth. Every day, millions of human offspring advance their capabilities under systematic instruction. She gestured around the classroom. This is not accidental, Marcus. Your species has created a planet-wide system for enhancing cognitive capabilities across entire generations. From a military perspective, it is the most sophisticated weapon development program ever conceived. Marcus looked at the cheerful artwork on the walls, the carefully organized learning materials, the small desks designed for growing minds. Except we don't think of it as a weapon. We think of it as giving kids the tools they need for happy, productive lives. That, Zyxandra said, is precisely what makes it so terrifying. You have created a system for developing unlimited capability enhancement, and you do not even recognize it as such. Outside the classroom windows, Marcus could see children playing on the playground, their laughter carrying across the schoolyard. Normal kids living normal lives, completely unaware that their education had become a matter of galactic security concern. As they packed up Zyxandra's equipment, Marcus found himself wondering what the council would decide when they fully understood the scope of human education. He was beginning to suspect that his species' love of learning might be about to make them either the most valued or the most feared civilization in the galaxy. And he still had no idea which outcome would be worse. The final meeting of the Galactic Oversight Council convened in Marcus's apartment on a Tuesday morning that looked deceptively ordinary. Outside his windows, Chicago was waking up like any other day, traffic humming along Lake Shore Drive, people heading to work and school, completely unaware that the fate of human civilization was being decided in a graduate student's living room. The holographic display that materialized was larger than any Marcus had seen before. Instead of the usual 3 to 20 figures, the conference space showed hundreds of beings from dozens of species. Marcus recognized Vorthak, but there were others he had never seen, crystalline entities that seemed to be made of living light, massive beings that looked like intelligent trees, creatures that appeared to exist partially in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "This is the full Galactic Oversight Council," ZYXandra explained quietly. "Representatives from every known sapient species." High Commander Velther stood at the center of the assembly, his imposing figure commanding immediate attention. "We are here to determine the classification and disposition of the species known as Homo sapiens of Sol 3, commonly called Earth," he announced. Scout ZYXandra has completed her comprehensive analysis of human civilization. The findings will determine whether humanity requires immediate intervention, ongoing monitoring, or... He paused, the silence heavy with implication. "Or elimination as a threat to galactic stability." Marcus felt his heart stop. "Elimination?" One of the crystalline beings spoke, its voice like wine through chimes. "Human Marcus Chen, you have been present throughout this investigation. Before we hear the formal report, the Council would hear your perspective on your species' reproductive and educational strategies." Marcus looked around at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, feeling completely out of his depth. "I honestly don't know what you want me to say. We're just people. We have kids, we try to give them good educations, we hope they'll make the world better than we found it. You hope they will exceed your capabilities," stated a tree-like being whose voice resonated like deep roots. "Well, yeah. Every generation should be better than the one before. And you accomplish this through systematic capability enhancement over extended development periods. We call it school," Marcus said, feeling increasingly surreal about the entire conversation. "Kids go to school to learn things." A multidimensional entity flickered in and out of visible existence as it spoke. "Human Marcus Chen, do you understand that your species has developed the most efficient civilization advancement mechanism ever documented? I understand that we care about education. I don't understand why that's threatening." High Commander Velther stepped forward. "Scout ZYXandra, present your final analysis." ZYXandra activated her display systems, filling the space around them with comprehensive data about human civilization. Population charts, educational statistics, technological advancement curves, innovation metrics, the entire scope of human development laid bare. "Esteemed Council," she began, after extensive observation and analysis, "I can confirm that human reproductive and educational strategies represent a fundamental departure from all known civilizational patterns." The displays showed comparative data from dozens of other species, each following similar patterns of rapid early development followed by capability plateaus. Unlike all documented sapient species, humans have developed a reproduction system that prioritizes long-term capability growth over immediate survival advantages. Their offspring require up to 18 years of intensive resource investment, during which they acquire capabilities that far exceed their genetic programming. Murmurs of discussion rippled through the council in dozens of different harmonic patterns. More significantly, ZYXandra continued, humans have created a planet-wide infrastructure to support this development process. They operate millions of educational facilities simultaneously, affecting over 2 billion developing individuals at any given time. The display zoomed in to show the scope of human educational systems, from elementary schools to universities, from apprenticeship programs to research institutions. The result is a civilization that does not plateau. Each generation exceeds the capabilities of the previous generation, and this acceleration is increasing over time. She manipulated the display to show human technological progress over the past several centuries. The curve was exponential and still rising. Based on current trajectories, humans will achieve technological capabilities equivalent to Level 5 civilizations within 500 years, Level 7 capabilities within 1,000 years, and theoretical Level 10 capabilities within 2,000 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, one of the crystalline beings spoke. Level 10 civilizations are theoretical constructs. No species has ever achieved such capabilities. That is correct, Zyxandra agreed. However, human development patterns suggest they may be the first. A creature that looked like an intelligent gas cloud shifted patterns as it communicated. What safeguards exist to prevent humans from becoming a threat to galactic stability? None, Zyxandra replied simply. Human advancement appears to be entirely internal and self-directing. There are no external limitations or controls. High Commander Velvar addressed the Council. The question before us is clear. Do we allow an unlimited growth civilization to develop unchecked, risking that they may eventually threaten the stability of all galactic civilization? Or do we intervene now, while intervention is still possible? Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. Wait, what kind of intervention are we talking about? The multi-dimensional entity flickered again. Options range from educational system restrictions to population controls to complete planetary quarantine to final solutions. Final solutions, Marcus repeated faintly. The elimination of the species as a threat, the entity confirmed without emotion. Marcus looked at Zyxandra desperately. There has to be another option. Actually, Zyxandra said slowly, I believe there is. All attention focused on her immediately. Council members, I request permission to present an alternative interpretation of the data. High Commander Velvar gestured for her to continue. Throughout this investigation, we have analyzed human reproductive and educational strategies from the perspective of threat assessment. But, I believe we have been asking the wrong questions. She manipulated her displays to show new data configurations. Instead of asking whether humans represent a threat, we should ask what humans represent an opportunity for. The display showed galactic civilization development patterns over thousands of years. Marcus could see periods of advancement followed by long stretches of stagnation, conflicts over resources, and recurring patterns of rise and decline. For millennia, galactic civilization has been limited by the same fundamental constraint that affects all known species: we reach the limits of our genetic programming and, then, plateau. We become more numerous, but not more capable. The display highlighted civilizations that had achieved interstellar travel, built vast empires, then stagnated and eventually declined when they encountered challenges requiring genuine innovation rather than just larger-scale application of existing capabilities. But humans have solved this limitation, Zyxandra continued. They have developed a mechanism for unlimited capability growth. Each generation can exceed the previous generation indefinitely. She paused, letting this sink in. Council members, what if instead of viewing humans as a threat to be managed, we viewed them as a solution to galactic stagnation? The tree-like being leaned forward. Explain. Humans excel at knowledge transfer and capability enhancement. Their educational systems could be adapted to help other species transcend their genetic limitations. Instead of eliminating human advancement, we could learn from it. The crystalline entity sparkled with increased intensity. You suggest that humans could teach other species to exceed their programming? I suggest that humans have developed principles of capability enhancement that could revolutionize galactic civilization, Zyxandra said. Instead of managing the threat, we could embrace the opportunity. High Commander Velvar's expression was unreadable. And the risks? Any advancement carries risks, Zyxandra acknowledged. But, the alternative is perpetual stagnation. Galactic civilization has been essentially static for thousands of years. Human methods could break us out of that cycle. Marcus found his voice. If I can add something, humans aren't interested in conquering anyone. We're interested in learning, growing, creating things, solving problems. If you're worried about us becoming a threat, why not work with us? We're really good at collaboration. The multi-dimensional entity considered this. What evidence supports human collaborative tendencies? Marcus gestured to Zyxandra. You've had an observer living in human society for months. Have humans tried to exploit her, capture her technology, or harm her in any way? No, Zyxandra confirmed. I have been treated as a welcome guest and research partner. Human Marcus has shared his home, his food, and his knowledge freely. When I have asked questions, he has answered honestly even when the answers revealed potential human vulnerabilities. And this behavior is typical of humans? Based on my observations, yes. Humans default to cooperation and mutual assistance unless given specific reasons to do otherwise. The council erupted in discussion, dozens of species communicating in their various harmonic patterns. Finally, High Commander Veldar called for order. The council will now deliberate. Scout Zyxandra and Human Marcus Chen, you will await our decision. The display flickered and went dark, leaving Marcus and Zyxandra alone in the sudden quiet of the apartment. Do you think they'll go for it? Marcus asked. I do not know, Zyxandra admitted. I have presented the best case I can make for human civilization. But the council has never encountered anything like your species before. Fear may override opportunity. They waited in tense silence for 3 hours. Finally, the display reactivated, showing the full council assembly. High Commander Veldar stood to address them. After extensive deliberation, the Galactic Oversight Council has reached a decision regarding humanity. Marcus held his breath. Humanity will be classified as a Class Omega Advancement civilization. However, instead of intervention or elimination, humanity will be invited to join the Galactic Confederation as a provisional member. Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief. However, Veldar continued, this membership comes with conditions. Humans will be paired with experienced galactic mentors to help guide their development. In exchange, humans will share their educational and capability enhancement methods with other Confederation species. The crystalline being spoke next. Additionally, Earth will host the first intergalactic institute for advancement studies, where representatives from all species can learn human methods of capability enhancement. You're going to turn Earth into a galactic university? Marcus asked, stunned. Among other things, yes, confirmed the tree-like being. Humanity has developed something unprecedented in galactic history, a sustainable method for unlimited growth. This knowledge is too valuable to risk losing to fear. The multi-dimensional entity addressed Zyxandra directly. Scout Zyxandra, you will serve as the primary liaison between humanity and the Confederation Council. Your understanding of both cultures makes you uniquely qualified for this role. Zyxandra straightened into her formal posture. I accept this assignment with honor. High Commander Veldar's expression almost seemed to soften. Human Marcus Chen, you have served as an excellent representative of your species throughout this process. The Council would be honored if you would consider serving as one of Earth's first ambassadors to the Galactic Confederation. Marcus looked around his small apartment, with its second-hand furniture and collection of family photos that had started this entire chain of events. Yes, I accept. Though I should probably finish my thesis first. Your thesis about interspecies cultural exchange, the crystalline being asked. We believe that research will prove remarkably relevant to your new role. As the council session formally ended and the various representatives began disconnecting from the communication array, Marcus found himself trying to process the magnitude of